Did the HOA really just send me an eviction notice from my own dock on the lake I own? I stared at the paper in disbelief, the weight of those cold words pressing down harder than any wave against the shoreline. The letters were sharp, official, and almost mocking, demanding I pack up my boat and kayak or face legal consequences. Who does that? Who thinks they can kick me off land that's been in my family for generations? My name's Michael Barrett. Civil engineer by trade, stubborn defender of my family's legacy by choice. And if you're watching this, drop a comment below telling me where you're tuning in from, because you're about to see exactly how I made those HOA bastards regret thinking they could mess with me. Stick around till the end, trust me. They're going to wish they never tangled with a guy who owns the lake. This lake, these docks, they're not just water and wood to me. They're the heartbeat of my childhood, the anchor of my family's story. My father built this place, brick by brick, with hands that knew sweat and patience. He wasn't just building a cabin, he was weaving a legacy into the soil and water. I remember the long summer evenings, my dad's quiet hum mixing with the lapping waves as he taught me how to paddle a kayak without making a sound. Those moments weren't just about the water, they were about family, connection, roots. Losing this would be like losing a piece of him. So when I got that notice, it wasn't just paperwork. It felt like a punch in the gut. It was more than the threat of eviction. It was an assault on everything my family stood for. But you know what? They made one big mistake. They forgot I'm not just some guy who'll roll over. I'm the guy who owns the lake, the docks, and every inch of water they think they can control. The HOA president, Vivian Mercer, is the type of person who loves the smell of power and the taste of control. She's sharp, cold, and as subtle as a thunderclap when it comes to pushing people around. But Vivian doesn't know me yet. She doesn't realize I'm not just going to take their petty fines and empty threats lying down. This fight started small. A fine here for parking my truck illegally, a complaint there about a dangerous dock extension. At first I thought maybe it was just a misunderstanding. Maybe they were worried about rules I hadn't thought through. But soon, those little issues snowballed. Vivian and her crew began ramping up the pressure, sending letters, blocking access to the dock, and whispering to neighbors to turn against me. They even tried to claim ownership of the boat dock, as if I was some trespasser on my own family's land. But here's the thing about people like Vivian. They don't expect resistance. They expect compliance. They expect the little guy to flinch and back down. That's where they made their biggest mistake. Behind this fight isn't just a battle over land or water, it's a battle over dignity, over fairness, over standing up when the powerful try to steamroll you. I'm fighting for my family's history, my son's future, and the right to enjoy the lake my father loved. You see, this isn't just about me, it's about any one of us who's ever been pushed around by people hiding behind rules and fancy titles. It's about knowing your worth and refusing to let others rewrite your story. So, to Vivian and her HOA cronies, get ready, because this lake belongs to me. The dock belongs to me, and I'm just getting started. The morning after I got that eviction notice, I found a bright orange envelope stuck under my windshield wiper. It was another fine from the HOA for parking my truck illegally on my own driveway. Illegal parking? On land I've owned since my dad signed the deed? It was laughable if it wasn't so infuriating. I called Vivian Mercer right away. The HOA president's voice was ice cold on the other end. Mr. Barrett, the rules apply to everyone. We expect compliance. I told her straight. Vivian, the only thing you're complying with is how fast I can fight back. This fine, it's baseless, and you know it. She didn't flinch. Instead, she replied with that same clipped tone. We have our procedures. If you want to dispute the fine, you can attend the next board meeting. Board meeting. The word tasted bitter. It was Vivian's arena, where power plays ruled and common sense died. So I showed up. The room was packed, though half the faces were those who kept their heads down, afraid to speak. Vivian sat at the head of the table, eyes sharp like a hawk ready to swoop. Greg Simmons, the HOA treasurer, was beside her, smirking as he tapped his pen against the table. You could almost smell the greed. During public comment I spoke, calmly but firmly. This fine is unjust. I've owned this property for decades. I've paid every fee, maintained every inch of this dock and driveway. I'm not here to play games. I'm here to protect what's mine. Greg jumped in. Rules are rules, Michael. You can't just expect to do whatever you want. I stared at him and said, "Funny, I thought ownership meant something around here. Funny how the rules suddenly don't apply to certain projects Greg's been pushing for." That jab made a few heads turn. You see, Greg's been angling for a lakeside development project. A fancy marina that would benefit a few big pockets while squeezing out families like mine. Elaine Foster, the secretary, piped up next. "This community needs order, not chaos. Mr. Barrett's dock extension has been a source of complaints." Complaints from who? I wondered aloud. From those who don't even use the lake? From neighbors who barely know their own yards? The meeting ended with more fines and warnings. But something had shifted. People were watching. Some nodded quietly when I spoke. Others looked away, uncomfortable. Driving home, Jenna asked, "Do you think this will end?" I shook my head. "Not anytime soon, but I'm not here to lose. This is about more than parking fines. It's about control, and I'm ready to take that back." At the dock, I ran my hand along the wooden rails, the rough texture grounding me. It reminded me of a story my dad once told me. About the importance of standing firm when tides try to wash away what you've built. "Never let anyone make you question your right to be here," he'd said, "because when you do, you lose a part of yourself." And that's exactly what Vivian and her board wanted. Make me doubt, make me back down, make me disappear. But here's the thing about stubbornness. It's like the roots of an old tree. The deeper they go, the harder it is to pull you out. So I started documenting everything. The fines, the notices, the board meetings. I talked to neighbors, quietly gathering support from those who felt the squeeze but feared speaking up. Tom Richards, a retired vet down the road, told me, "They don't just push you around because they're right. They do it because you let them." That night, I realized this wasn't just my fight. It was ours. The small battles with parking fines and dock complaints were just the beginning. Vivian's power plays were calculated, designed to wear me down. But every time she pushed, I found a way to push back. Legal letters, recorded meetings, neighborhood calls. It was chess, and Vivian thought she was the grandmaster. But she hadn't met the underdog willing to sacrifice every piece. The more Vivian and her crew pushed, the clearer it became that this was never really about rules or community standards. It was about power, the kind that feels good only if you're sitting in the driver's seat, steering everything around you. And I had no intention of handing over my family's legacy without a fight. After the latest round of fines and threats, I dove headfirst into the paperwork, the old deeds, the lake's ownership records, and the boat dock permits that had somehow slipped under the HOA's radar. What I found wasn't just a crack in their narrative. It was a full-blown canyon. Turns out my family didn't just own the cabin. Through a little-known clause buried in some ancient property records, we held legal ownership of the lake itself, plus the adjoining boat docks. The same docks Vivian and her board claimed as community property to justify their control. That discovery changed everything. I sat down with Jenna that evening, papers spread across the kitchen table, the dim light casting long shadows on the walls. "Look at this," I said, pointing at the documents, my voice low but steady. "This isn't just a fight over fines or docks. I own the water, Jenna, literally." She leaned in, eyebrows raised, eyes flicking between the documents and my face. "So, they can't just kick you out?" "Exactly," I said, the weight of that truth settling like ice in my chest. "They don't know it yet, but they've been building their case on sand. I'm about to turn the tide." The irony wasn't lost on me. Vivian, with all her swagger and suits, thought she had the upper hand, but in reality, she was playing checkers while I was setting up a chessboard, and every piece I moved from here on out would count. My dad had always told me that owning land was more than just property lines and deeds. It was about stewardship, protecting what was yours so future generations could stand where you stood and feel the same pride. Now, it felt like the moment to honor that lesson in the most direct way possible. I called up Tom Richards the next morning. A man of few words, Tom knew the neighborhood's history better than anyone. He'd fought small battles of his own against HOA heavy-handedness over the years, and his insight was invaluable. "Michael," he said over the phone, his voice gruff but warm, "if you've got that kind of ownership, then you've got a trump card. But you've got to play it smart. Don't just flash the papers around. Use them." And smart was exactly what I intended to do. The days that followed were a whirlwind of calls, research, and quiet conversations with neighbors who'd started whispering their doubts about Vivian and her agenda. I drafted a plan. First, solidify the evidence, then prepare to confront the HOA legally, and finally, rally community support so Vivian couldn't drown me out with her usual bluster. One afternoon, Jenna and I drove down to the county records office. Surrounded by dusty books and official stamps, I pored over more deeds and historical maps, each one reinforcing what I already suspected. The lake's boundaries, the dock's ownership. It was all there, in black and white. "This is more than a paper trail," Jenna said, watching me scan the documents. "It's a lifeline." I nodded, feeling the heavy responsibility settle on my shoulders. This wasn't just about winning against an overbearing HOA. It was about preserving my family's connection to this place, the same connection my son Lucas would inherit. That night, as I sat by the dock with a cold beer in hand, I reflected on the battles ahead. Vivian's threats were loud, but now they were background noise to a larger, quieter power awakening. I could almost hear my dad's voice, steady and calm, reminding me to hold fast. In the coming weeks, I started drafting formal letters, carefully outlining the legal facts, citing the ownership clause, and demanding the HOA cease their overreach. Vivian's response was predictably dismissive, thinly veiled threats mixed with bureaucratic jargon, but I felt the tide beginning to turn. I also arranged a meeting with Susan Dale, a sharp attorney specializing in property law. Her confidence reassured me. "They're bluffing," she said after reviewing the documents. "You have a strong case. The HOA's claims won't hold up if you push back hard." Her words were the fuel I needed. With Susan's guidance, I began preparing a formal dispute, gathering all the evidence of the HOA's attempts to intimidate and obstruct. I also encouraged neighbors to document their own experiences, fines, blocked access, and the ever-present undercurrent of fear Vivian tried to cultivate. Meanwhile, Vivian's tactics grew bolder. One morning, I found a no-access sign nailed to the path leading to my dock, complete with a stern warning about trespassing. A petty move, but telling. I took it down. The next day, the sign was back. This back and forth felt absurd, almost comedic, but beneath it lay a serious message. Vivian wanted me gone, and she was willing to play dirty. I called her directly, the line crackling as I held my ground. "Vivian, you're wasting your time. This lake, this dock, this home, they're mine. The sooner you accept that, the better for everyone." Her laugh was cold, clipped. "You're stubborn, Michael, but stubborn won't save you when the whole HOA is against you." "I don't need the whole HOA, just the law on my side." That conversation marked a turning point. Vivian realized I wasn't bluffing, and she wasn't about to back down easily either. But so was I. Each day I felt less like a victim and more like a guardian, someone standing at the intersection of history, family, and justice. This fight wasn't just about holding ground physically, it was about proving that even the most powerful bullies couldn't erase what was rightfully mine. As the sun dipped behind the trees, casting a fiery glow over the lake's surface, I knew this was only the beginning. The HOA may have thought they had the upper hand, but in reality, I was just getting started. With Susan Dale on my side, things started moving in a way I hadn't expected. The legal wheels churned slowly but steadily, grinding down the HOA's overreach one motion at a time. We began sending formal letters demanding the immediate halt of all fines, notices, and threats against my property. Vivian's response? A flurry of cold, legal-sounding replies that were mostly hot air. One afternoon, I sat in my study, watching Susan pace the room with the kind of focused energy I'd only seen in courtroom dramas. "They're playing for time," she said, eyes sharp beneath her glasses. "Vivian knows she can't win this battle in court if it comes down to facts, so she'll try to intimidate you instead." And intimidate she did. Within days, the HOA began restricting my dock utilities. Water and electricity cut without warning. It was a petty move, but effective. No lights meant no evening fishing trips with Lucas. No electric heaters meant chilly mornings by the lake. It was the kind of psychological push designed to make me back down quietly. I called the utility company immediately, only to find the HOA had convinced them to comply. It was a slap in the face, but I kept my cool. "This isn't over," I told Susan. "They're trying to squeeze me out with every trick they have." Susan nodded, "And we'll expose every one of them." I took a walk to the dock that evening, the fading sun casting long shadows on the water's surface. I ran my fingers along the wood, thinking about the battles ahead. The dock was more than just a structure. It was a symbol of my family's connection to this place, a bridge between past and future. The next HOA meeting was coming up fast, and I planned to attend with a new weapon: facts. I spent hours prepping, rehearsing points, anticipating Vivian's tactics. It was time to turn the tables. The night of the meeting, I arrived early, the room buzzing with murmurs and sidelong glances. Vivian was there, seated like a queen surveying her court. Greg Simmons was already whispering to a few board members, his smirk sharper than ever. When my turn came, I stood and laid out the evidence. Legal documents proving ownership of the lake and docks, records of the utilities cut without notice, and a clear timeline of the HOA's harassment tactics. I spoke with calm precision, each word cutting through the room like a well-aimed arrow. Vivian's eyes flickered with irritation, but she stayed composed. When I finished, she launched into her rebuttal, threats of further legal action, veiled accusations of me being a troublemaker, and reminders that rules are rules. But this time, I wasn't alone. Several neighbors stood and voiced their support, sharing stories of similar fines and restrictions. The room's atmosphere shifted, the power Vivian wielded felt less absolute. Elaine Foster tried to restore order, but the damage was done. The community was waking up. Later, Jenna and I drove home in silence, the weight of the night settling over us. "They're rattled," she said softly. I smiled, tired but determined. Good. Let them be. Over the next few weeks, the HOA's tactics grew more desperate. I found a no trespassing sign nailed to the path leading to my dock, an attempt to block access. It was childish but effective for those who didn't know the truth. I removed the sign, replacing it with a simple plaque. Property of Michael Barrett. Trespassers will be prosecuted. Vivian called, voice tight. "This isn't going to end well for you." I laughed, genuine and unshaken. "It's only just beginning." The battle was no longer just about land or rules. It was a fight for respect, fairness, and the right to stand firm against those who abuse power. Each small victory felt like a stone laid in the foundation of something bigger. Vivian's reign was faltering, and I was ready to keep pressing. As I stood by the lake one cool evening, watching Lucas cast his fishing line into the still water, I felt a quiet pride. This place was ours, and no eviction notice, no power cut, no petty sign would change that. The neighborhood had always looked peaceful, the kind of place where everyone waved at each other from porches and shared stories over fences. But beneath that calm surface, something was stirring. The HOA's push against me wasn't just a personal vendetta anymore. It was stirring the entire community into a slow-burning storm. Word had gotten out about the fines, the power cuts, the no trespassing signs. Some neighbors whispered their own grievances, cautious but eager for someone to stand up. Others, loyal to Vivian's vision, painted me as the troublemaker threatening the neighborhood's order. At the next community meeting, the room was packed. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric. Vivian opened the floor with her usual polished confidence, warning about maintaining property values and community standards. But this time, the crowd wasn't entirely on her side. I waited for my moment, then spoke calmly but firmly. This fight isn't about me. It's about fairness and respect. We all deserve to live here without fear of arbitrary fines or having our access cut off. I looked around the room, catching nods from a handful of familiar faces. Elaine Foster, ever the rule enforcer, interrupted sharply. "Mr. Barrett, the rules are clear. We're trying to protect the community, not harass individuals." Greg Simmons chimed in, smirking. "We can't have people breaking rules because they think ownership means anything. It's about compliance." That's when a voice from the back stood up, a neighbor I barely knew named Linda. "I've been fined twice for parking on my own property's driveway." "Twice," she said, frustration sharp in her voice. "And what about the kids who can't use the playground because it's always under maintenance?" Suddenly, a wave of murmurs swept the room. Others joined in, sharing stories of petty fines and unexplained restrictions. It was clear Vivian's grip was loosening. Jenna whispered to me, "They're waking up." I nodded, knowing the shift wasn't just about words. It was about breaking the silence that had kept everyone afraid. Vivian tried to steer the meeting back, but the momentum had changed. Afterwards, a few neighbors approached me, shaking my hand, thanking me for speaking up. Tom Richards gave me a knowing look. "You've cracked the shell. Now we chip away." But not everyone was happy. Vivian's eyes darkened when she passed me in the hallway. "This isn't over, Barrett," she hissed. "You've only made things worse." I smiled, steady as the lake at dawn. Maybe, or maybe I'm just getting started. That night, I sat on the dock, the moon casting silver ripples across the water. I thought about the small victories, the support of neighbors, the cracks in the HOA's armor, and how much farther we still had to go. I realized this battle wasn't just legal or personal, it was about community, about reclaiming a place where people felt heard and respected, not ruled by fear. The next day, I started organizing a neighborhood group, a coalition of those tired of the fines, the threats, and the cold authority of the HOA. We shared stories, drafted petitions, and planned to attend every meeting, every vote, every discussion. This was grassroots resistance, born not from anger alone, but from a deep desire for fairness. Meanwhile, Vivian was working behind the scenes, trying to rally her allies. I heard rumors of secret meetings, of attempts to undermine our group, but the more she pushed, the more people leaned into the change. One afternoon, Tom dropped by with a thick folder. "Evidence," he said simply. "Photographs, copies of illegal notices, even recordings from the last meeting." We pored over the materials, feeling the weight of proof in our hands. Vivian's power was built on control and silence, but now, armed with facts and united voices, that power was fading fast. The fight was no longer mine alone. It was ours. As I looked out over the lake, the water glinting under the afternoon sun, I felt a surge of hope. The HOA might have started this battle, but the community was deciding how it would end. By now, Vivian Mercer wasn't just frustrated, she was furious. The steady erosion of her control over the neighborhood and the growing opposition had her scrambling for a new playbook. But power, when it's threatened, tends to lash out, and Vivian's next moves were a mix of desperation and calculated aggression. One morning, I noticed the no-access signs had multiplied, now posted at every conceivable entrance to my dock. Each one was professionally printed and nailed firmly into the ground. It was a clear message: stay out. That afternoon, I received an official-looking letter stating the HOA was considering barring me from the docks permanently, citing safety concerns and non-compliance. The irony wasn't lost on me. Safety concerns? From a dock I'd personally maintained for decades, under the watchful eyes of my family? Instead of flinching, I called Susan. "Vivian's escalating," I said, holding the letter in my hand. "This is a power play to scare me off." Susan nodded gravely. "They're trying to box you in, Michael, but every move they make gives us more ammunition." Her confidence was contagious. We began documenting every new sign, every letter, every harassment attempt. I even set up a discreet camera near the dock entrance, not to spy, but to capture evidence of the HOA's attempts to block me. Vivian's intimidation tactics also reached into the utilities. One morning, I found the electricity cut again. No warning, no notice. I called the power company only to learn the HOA had put in the request, claiming unpaid fees. Another lie. The next day, I personally went to the company's office with proof of payment. They reversed the cut immediately, but the message was clear. Vivian was willing to weaponize anything. I shared this with Tom, who shook his head. "They think they can push you to breaking point, but that kind of pressure only strengthens the roots." At the next HOA meeting, Vivian's posture had stiffened. She tried to project control, but her voice faltered when I called her out directly. "Vivian, your campaign of intimidation isn't just unfair, it's illegal." She shot back. "This community has rules. You don't get to rewrite them just because you own a few docks." "That's where you're wrong," I said. "Ownership means responsibility and respect. You're abusing yours." The tension was palpable, but something unexpected happened. Several board members exchanged uneasy glances. Even Greg Simmons looked less smug, his facade cracking. After the meeting, I received a call from a longtime resident, Mrs. Caldwell. "Michael, you're giving us hope," she said quietly. "We've been too afraid to speak." That night, Jenna and I sat on the porch, the lake reflecting the moon's silver glow. "This is bigger than I imagined," she said, "but you're not alone." Her words reminded me why I'd taken this fight on, to protect a place where family could thrive without fear. In the following days, I continued to rally support, sending out updates and encouraging neighbors to stand firm. Vivian's tactics might have grown more aggressive, but so had our resolve. One afternoon, I received a text from Susan. Prepare for a counteroffensive. We're filing a complaint about harassment and illegal utility shutoffs. That felt like a turning point. I was no longer just defending, I was going on the offense. Standing on my dock that evening, the signs and barriers fading into the background, I felt a surge of quiet power. Vivian's threats were loud, but they couldn't drown out the truth. No matter how hard she pushed, this lake, this dock, this community, they were mine to protect. Susan's call came early one morning. Michael, we've got what we need to hit them where it hurts. Time to gather the community and get serious. Felt a rush, not just adrenaline, but a deep, burning sense of purpose. The endless fines, the utility cuts, the threats, they had crossed a line. Now, armed with evidence and the support of neighbors, we could finally expose Vivian Mercer and her cronies for what they really were. I met with Tom and Jenna later that day. Tom handed me a thick binder. Photos of illegally posted signs, copies of cutoff notices, recorded HOA meetings where Vivian's board manipulated votes, and testimonies from neighbors too afraid to speak before. This is the nail in their coffin, he said gruffly. We planned a community gathering, not just another HOA meeting, but a rally, a chance for voices long silenced to be heard. Flyers went up, messages spread, and slowly the neighborhood began to rally. The day of the gathering, the park near the lake buzzed with a nervous energy. Familiar faces mingled with new ones. People tired of being pushed around, eager for change. Children played nearby, the sound of laughter a sharp contrast to the tension in the air. I took the stage, heart steady but voice loud and clear. This isn't just about my fight, I said. It's about all of us. About fairness, respect, and standing up to those who think power gives them the right to silence the rest of us. I laid out the evidence, piece by piece, letting the facts speak louder than any threat ever could. The crowd's reactions ranged from disbelief to anger, but mostly, I saw something else. Hope. Vivian, of course, was there, watching from the sidelines, her expression unreadable, but her posture defensive. She tried to interrupt, her voice sharp and commanding, but the crowd wasn't having it. Neighbors shared their stories, fines for minor infractions, locked gates, and a community divided by fear. Each testimony chipped away at Vivian's facade, revealing a leadership built on control rather than care. One woman, Linda, spoke softly but firmly. I was fined for planting flowers outside my front door. Flowers! They said it was unauthorized landscaping. When I protested, they cut my water supply. Her words drew gasps. I glanced at Vivian, whose eyes flickered with something like panic. After the gathering, as the crowd dispersed, several neighbors approached me with gratitude and renewed strength. Tom clapped me on the back. You're shaking the foundations, Michael. Keep going. But the fight wasn't over. Vivian's response came swiftly. New rules drafted to tighten control, threats of lawsuits, and veiled warnings to those who dared join our cause. Still, the community had tasted empowerment. The fear that once silenced them was breaking. Over the next weeks, we documented every move, every notice, every attempt at intimidation. Susan prepared the legal case with meticulous care. The opposition was fierce, but so was our resolve. One afternoon, Jenna and I sat by the lake, watching the sun set in fiery hues. Do you ever get tired? She asked gently. Sometimes, I admitted. But then I remember why this matters. For Lucas, for my dad's memory, and for everyone here. It's worth every fight. As darkness fell, the water mirrored the stars, calm but alive. I knew the battles ahead would test us all, but together we were ready. The legal battle was heating up, but nothing matched the intensity of the upcoming town hall meeting, the one where I would lay everything bare. Months of mounting evidence, witness accounts, and growing neighborhood support all pointed to this moment. A public confrontation with Vivian Mercer and her HOA board. Walking into the community center, I felt the familiar knot in my stomach, but it was mixed with something new. Confidence. This wasn't just my fight anymore. It was a collective stand against abuse. Chairs filled quickly, neighbors whispering, exchanging looks that said, "We're ready." Vivian arrived with her usual air of control, but there was a flicker in her eyes, a hint of unease. She knew the tide was turning, and tonight the floodgates would open. As the meeting began, I started with a personal story. This lake and these docks aren't just property lines on a map, they are my family's legacy, handed down from my father who believed in stewardship and respect. The room quieted. I could see people leaning in. I presented the evidence methodically, deeds proving ownership, copies of illegal notices, recordings of HOA meetings where decisions were manipulated. Each piece struck harder than the last. Vivian tried to interrupt, her voice sharp. Mr. Barrett, your claims are exaggerated. This board acts for the good of the community. I held up a photograph showing one of her own board members secretly meeting with a developer interested in buying the lakefront. Is this your version of community good? Murmurs spread, the room shifting. Neighbors came forward, sharing stories of intimidation, unfair fines, and the fear that had silenced them for too long. Linda, whose flowers had been uprooted, spoke with quiet dignity. We deserve to live without fear of harassment. Even Greg Simmons looked uncomfortable, caught between loyalty and the crumbling truth. Vivian's composure cracked when I exposed her attempts to cut off utilities and restrict access without due process. Her words grew defensive, even desperate. When it was my turn to speak again, I laid out a simple truth. This fight is about fairness, about standing up when power is misused. It's about a community that refuses to be silenced. The crowd erupted in applause. As the meeting ended, Vivian's glare met mine one last time. This isn't over, she warned. I smiled, steady. It is, Vivian, because truth has a way of winning. Walking outside, I felt a surge of relief and pride. The neighborhood was awakening, and the grip of fear was loosening. Later that night, Jenna and I sat by the dock, the lake's calm surface reflecting the stars above. You did good today, she said, softly. I looked out over the water, feeling the weight of the journey and the promise of what was to come. We did good. And this is only the beginning. The town hall had shifted the momentum decisively, but Vivian wasn't finished. If anything, her next move was the most audacious yet. A surprise legal counterattack aimed at me personally. Out of the blue, I was slapped with a lawsuit alleging unauthorized modifications to the dock and harassment of HOA members. The papers arrived on a gray Thursday morning, cold and clinical, but with a clear message. She was fighting back. I stared at the stack for a moment, then picked up the phone. Susan, they've escalated. Her voice was steady. Good. That means they're on the ropes. Let's get ready to counterstrike. Preparing for the court battle wasn't just about hiring experts or gathering documents. It was about preparing mentally for a war of attrition. Vivian's legal team tried to paint me as reckless, the troublemaker destabilizing the community. But Susan had other plans. She meticulously dismantled their claims, pointing out inconsistencies and exposing the baseless nature of their accusations. In court, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Vivian sat rigidly at the plaintiff's table while I remained calm beside Susan. Our strategy was simple. Prove ownership, expose harassment, and reveal HOA overreach. Witnesses from the neighborhood testified, sharing their experiences of intimidation and unfair fines. Their voices gave weight to the legal facts, painting a picture of a board abusing its authority. One particularly telling moment was when Tom Richards took the stand. His steady, no-nonsense testimony about HOA corruption and favoritism left Vivian's attorney grasping for answers. Despite Vivian's fierce defense, cracks appeared in her case. Documents were scrutinized. Her attempts to suppress evidence were exposed. The courtroom drama was intense, every exchange a chess move with high stakes. Outside, news of the case spread through the community like wildfire. People who'd stayed silent now expressed support openly, emboldened by the fight. During a recess, Jenna squeezed my hand. You're doing great. I nodded, feeling the weight of the fight, but also the strength that came with standing firm. The climax of the hearing came when Susan presented an old, overlooked deed proving my ownership of the dock and lake, something Vivian hadn't anticipated. The judge's expression shifted. This was a game changer. Vivian's frustration was palpable. Her final arguments lacked the force of previous ones, edged with desperation. When the verdict came down days later, it was a clear victory. The court ruled in my favor, declaring the HOA's claims invalid and ordering them to cease all harassment. But more than the legal win, it was the public validation of what we'd all fought for: a community's right to fairness and respect. Walking out of the courthouse, surrounded by neighbors and supporters, I felt a surge of triumph that went beyond paperwork. This was justice served, not just for me, but for everyone who'd dared to stand up. Victory in court brought a surge of relief, but the fight was far from over. Vivian Mercer's grip on the HOA was slipping, and desperation made her unpredictable. Just when I'd thought I'd seen all her cards, a former board member reached out, a surprising ally. I remember the call vividly. "Michael, this is Rachel Holt. I was on the board for years, but I left because I couldn't stomach the way Vivian runs things. There's more going on behind the scenes than you know. I can help." Meeting Rachel was like discovering a hidden chamber in an old house, full of secrets and stories waiting to come to light. Over coffee, she shared accounts of corruption, favoritism, and covert deals that undermined the community's trust. "They've been funneling funds to developers who want to turn the lakefront into a commercial zone," Rachel confided. "Vivian's been orchestrating it all, sidelining anyone who stands in her way." Her insider testimony was a bombshell. It revealed a side of the HOA that wasn't just about petty fines and power plays, it was about greed and betrayal. We worked together to gather more evidence. Rachel provided emails, financial statements, and meeting minutes that had been kept hidden from residents. Each document was another piece of the puzzle, exposing Vivian's manipulation. When I confronted Vivian with this new information, her veneer cracked. At a subsequent HOA meeting, the atmosphere was electric with tension. Vivian's usual smirk faltered as Rachel laid out the facts in front of the community. "You've betrayed our trust," Rachel declared. "This board isn't protecting the neighborhood, it's selling it out." Vivian's defense was weak, her words clipped and defensive. The board members who once nodded in her presence now exchanged uncertain glances. The community's faith in her leadership was eroding fast. After that meeting, whispers of change echoed through the streets. Neighbors who had stayed silent found courage. The momentum was undeniable. One afternoon, Jenna and I walked along the lake, the water shimmering under the afternoon sun. "It's amazing what a little truth can do," she said. I smiled, "and how powerful people fear it." That night, as I sat by the dock reflecting on the journey, I realized this battle wasn't just legal or personal, it was a fight for the soul of our community. Vivian's empire was crumbling, but the real victory was reclaiming a neighborhood where fairness and honesty could flourish again. I was ready for whatever came next. Vivian might have had power once, but now the power belonged to the people and to me. The final showdown was fast approaching. Vivian's fortress of control was crumbling, and the neighborhood was buzzing with a mix of anticipation and relief. But no matter how much the community rallied, the climax of this fight came down to one last confrontation. Just Vivian and me. It was a crisp morning when I got the call. Vivian wanted a face-to-face meeting. No lawyers, no board members, just us. Part of me wondered if it was a trap, but I knew this was the moment to close the chapter. We met at the old community center, the room empty except for a single table and 2 chairs. Vivian sat there, sharp and poised, but the spark of confidence I'd seen before was dimmer now. "Michael," she said, voice measured but edged with fatigue, "you've been a thorn in my side longer than I expected." I smiled calmly. "You underestimate me. That's your biggest mistake." She leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You think you've won, but this neighborhood isn't yours to control." I shook my head. "It's not about control. It's about respect and fairness. Something you lost along the way." The conversation turned to the dock and the lake, what they meant to each of us. I told her about my father's hands, worn from years of building, about teaching my son to fish in these waters. Vivian listened, the armor cracking. "I wanted power," she admitted quietly, "because I was afraid of losing it." That vulnerability shifted the tone. I nodded. "Fear makes people do reckless things, but standing up for what's right, that's courage." In that room, the tension between us was less about battle and more about reckoning. After what felt like hours, Vivian sighed and stood. "You've changed the neighborhood, maybe it's time I step aside." I watched as she walked away, a woman stripped of illusions but perhaps a little freer. Walking out, the sun hit the lake, sparkling like a promise. I knew this wasn't just a personal victory, it was a new beginning. That evening, I sat with Jenna and Lucas by the dock, the water calm, the future uncertain but bright. "This place is ours," I said softly. and a smile squeezing my hand. And so is your courage. I looked out over the lake, feeling the weight of what we'd fought for. A legacy not just of land, but of dignity, community, and justice. The days after my final meeting with Vivian felt almost surreal. The lake was quiet again, the dock restored to its rightful place, a symbol not just of property, but of resilience. The neighborhood was beginning to heal, the bruises from the battle slowly fading into lessons learned. Jenna and I spent a lot of time by the water, watching Lucas fish with a patience that made me proud. That dock wasn't just wood and nails. It was the foundation of my family's memories and future. Neighbors approached me with smiles instead of sideways glances. The community meetings changed tone, becoming more about rebuilding trust than power struggles. Even some former board members reached out, seeking to help repair what Vivian's reign had fractured. One afternoon, I found myself sitting with Rachel Holt, the former board member who had been our unexpected ally. "You changed more than just the rules," she said quietly. "You reminded everyone what this place is really about." I nodded, feeling the weight of that truth. It wasn't just about winning a legal battle. It was about standing up when others stayed silent, about fighting for fairness even when it seemed impossible. That fight changed me too. I learned that courage isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet resolve to keep going, day after day, despite the odds. Looking back, I realized the eviction notice was just the start of something much bigger, a call to protect what matters most. And that's what I want you to remember. If you're watching this while wrestling with your own HOA nightmare, don't lose hope. Power isn't always with those who shout the loudest. Sometimes it's with those who understand the rules, who have the patience to wait, and the wisdom to strike at the right moment. Stand firm, gather your truth, find your allies. Because justice, no matter how slow, always finds a way. And if Vivian Mercer taught me anything, it's that those who bully and threaten, well, they always lose in the end.